Uja, greeting. This is a short video to talk about the new publication of the book of the Amt Duat. Which is a text that was written to convey the teachings of the Amt Duat text, which is mostly found in the tombs, what are referred to as tombs, in the Valley of the Kings in Egypt. I first became aware of this text in the early 2000s. And then a few years later, so I started looking into it and started studying it. Then a few years later, I started giving teachings on it to spiritual aspirants. And now we've come out with the first publication of a text that is directly related to this teaching. So it's done in translation, meaning the text is translated. And the purpose of the translation is to translate the text according to the original intent of the sages. And the pharaohs, the Pharaonic sages, and the sages, the priests and priestesses who they were associated with. And these teachings are commonly referred to as the Netherworld guides, which encompasses other books of the same genre, contemporary texts, such as the Book of the Gates. But for this one, I wanted to focus more on the Book of the Amt Duat, because it's a very profound treatise, and it's really an examination of the psychophysiological processes that are to be undertaken by a spiritual aspirant to transform spiritually, to grow spiritually, and to achieve certain higher states of consciousness. So this is a Kemetic psychology, Kemetic referring to the landmass today, the country today that is known as Egypt. Its original name was Kemet in ancient times. And so when I say Kemetic psychology, it's referring to the practice of psychology in ancient Egypt during the Pharaonic era. And when I say Kemetic psychology, I'm referring to states that in modern psychology, the issue is if someone is depressed or they're suffering schizophrenia or some kind of psychological disturbance, they go see a psychologist to get straightened out, to get fixed up, and to get normalized. With a text like the Am Duat, it's a psychology from the respect that it is taking an already normal person and helping them, and through certain practices are eliciting certain psychological and mental states through the spiritual continuum of a human being. And this is what the sages were doing. And if you take the teaching to its terminal point, what would happen is that you would achieve a state of consciousness that is referred to as spiritual enlightenment. You can do that in your very lifetime. So these texts are commonly written. You can find them on other genres as well, other mediums such as papyrus paper, or you can find them on stone sarcophagi, etc. Well, if you want to see a full rendition as is found, you have to go to what is referred to as the tombs. And there are certain of the tombs that have, there are 12 divisions, which I refer to as metaphysical processes. So this psychology surrounds metaphysical processes that a spiritual practitioner has to undertake during certain meditation practices. So in conceiving of the book, I had to generate a new kind of language or terminology to try to explain what is really going on, the essence of the text. And so I referred to what I commonly refer to as the tombs as metaphysical devices. So the metaphysical processes, the texts related to the metaphysical processes are written in the metaphysical devices. So for example, in the metaphysical device, we're going to use that terminology going forward. In the metaphysical device of Seti Ua, you find 11 of the 12 books. And in other metaphysical devices, you may find 6 or 7 of the metaphysical processes. And that can be referred to as books in a kind of a mundane, from a mundane perspective. And then certain other metaphysical devices, you can find a full rendition of all 12 of the metaphysical processes. And in the book itself, what is done is these spiritual trainings that the pharaohs were doing. And that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, to try to clarify uh, the life of the pharaoh. The pharaoh he had his secular duties and he had his spiritual duties, he or she. So the pharaoh was actually a priest. And if it was a female pharaoh, a priestess. And they had certain temple rites and rituals to perform, etc. So the notion of them being warrior kings and expansionist imperialists, those ideas I tend to not agree with, uh, from the perspective of how I was being conveyed. That they're wearing their crown, they're a warrior crown, and they have to go out and wage battles, and it's kind of uh, an unfortunate situation in some respects. They were actually priests and priestesses, and so they were performing these practices, and these practices, these metaphysical states or conditions that they would get into, you would have to already be a normalized person. You will already have to have preliminary meditation practice under your belt. It's not something that you can just get into. It's an advanced system of metaphysics. And how I know that is by going through the text, by reading and studying the text, and looking at it from the perspective in which it was originally written, which is a perspective of yoga mysticism. Uh, and so they were performing these disciplines, but you had to have been prepped already with preliminary trainings. And through those preliminary trainings, then you were developed to where you could actually uh, practice the teaching, and also the the getting into the philosophy behind it. So there's a base philosophy behind the Am Duat text, and there are two mythologies that actually informs the text: the Assyrian resurrection and the story of Ra and Aset, or Ra and Isis, and the theology of what is referred to as a Noonian theology, which is a theology that was practiced in Anu, the city of Anu, the ancient city of Anu, which is today Cairo, and the mysteries of the city of Abydos, uh, which in ancient times were referred to as Abdu, which is a city of Asar. So you have the Asarian side of it, and you have the Ra side of it, and those two theologies and the mysticism of those theologies are the basis, or the underpinnings of the Amt Duat text. So the ancient practitioners, they went through years of preliminary training and practices. So what I did in writing the book is that I detailed the preliminary practices and the preliminary philosophies. And then, so that's like the first half of the book. And the second half of the book is actually going into the text itself, and with its full translations and the metaphysical principles, which are the gods and goddesses, the divinities. And like unlike the in Western religion, the serpent is primarily inimical. The Adam was he was tricked by the serpent, and to eat the apple and things like that. But in Eastern religion, and in particularly ancient Egyptian Kemetic religion and philosophy, the serpent is primarily positive. You have serpent goddesses, and you have the serpent energies, and you have the serpent powers, and these are the powers that are used to convey and to augment the spiritual evolution of a human being. Uh, and so a lot of the text is a lot of what you see is actually metaphorical, it's not literal. So the text, as was said before, these metaphysical processes, so it's not that you know how it's usually told that the dead king goes through the 12 hours of the night to join with Ra again, and the sunrise, and the next day, and things like that. I would say that's more of a kind of uh, an elementary way of looking at it. It's really a system of spiritual yoga mystic exercises and metaphysical practices that a human being can participate in to generate and to experience higher consciousness and to ultimately achieve enlightenment. And as I was saying before, this is a kind of psychology, but it's a mystic psychology. And so you find that some of the practices that the initiates were doing through the Amt Duat text itself, through the philosophical premise of the text, the philosophy that is coming through the text, and through the practices that are conveyed in the text, what you find is that these are, are psychological, they're practices that help to resolve deep psychological issues that are under the surface in the unconscious mind. So, for example, a person, let's say a person was in a bad relationship. This is just an example. A person was in a bad relationship and they were traumatized by it, but they went to they went to counseling. They met someone, a good counselor who helped them to get over the trauma of being in a bad relationship or whatever, and they get over it and they're normalized. And that normalization is pretty much on the surface. And what the Amt Duat does, it you can generate a psychological condition. I'm not going to tell you which of the which of the lines of the books, because you have to get the book for that. But you generate a certain kind of condition whereby the deep underlying unconscious impression of that trauma is dealt with. And the reason why the text is developed that way and why the the practice is to resolve those deep-seated issues in the unconscious is because you have to resolve those issues to experience higher consciousness, because those issues will act as preventative forces from experiencing higher consciousness. And so they have to be resolved. And so remember I said in the beginning how the practitioners went through preliminary trainings. And those preliminary trainings were done to normalize them. You're coming from an environment where you're living like a normal person, doing normal things, and then you get into certain practices which conditions your mind and prepares your body to take on a deeper practice and to handle higher forces or stronger forces. And so your body has to be prepared. And so you become normalized. And then you get into these kinds of trainings and you become super normalized. And so that's how it's done. Another interesting feature of the book is that the tomb, is actually the metaphysical device of Tutankhamun or Tutankhamun, as translated and presented in the book. I'll give you a sneak peek. You can see. You see here, a sneak peek. You can see the book is in color. And so we did. Then the reason why, because it ties into the whole idea of the Amt Duat, and you'll see when you get the book and you read it how it all ties in and so forth. And then the book covers, there are 12 divisions, which we are calling metaphysical processes. And this book covers the first 3 of the 12 metaphysical processes. When you get into it, you find that although it is told as a sequence of events, you can localize them and practice one for a long period of time, up to years, etc. So here's the back of the book, the back cover. And this book, it's been, because I've been looking through it and so forth. And so far, we've gotten nice reviews. People really liked it, and it's comforting and illuminating for personalities. You know, it helps them, etc. Older people have gotten the book. You know, people in their 60s and have explicitly asked for the book because they're older and they're moving into the last years. So they wanted a spiritual text to read and to study in their final years. You know, older people who are sick and so forth, to offer guidance and comfort, etc. So all of those, and for younger people, you know, it's the one of the another common misconception is that the books were primarily done for dead kings, dead pharaohs. But what was really happening is that they were studying these texts while they were alive, and they designed their metaphysical devices with these texts that would be with them, uh, you know. And some of the pharaohs became, in while they were alive, achieved spiritual enlightenment. So they didn't need the text per se, but they had their tombs, their metaphysical devices designed with the text as per convention at the time. This was like the style at the time. That's where they're doing it. Uh, and down in the burial chamber, what is referred to as a burial chamber, which we are now calling the Ascension Hall, uh, for some who did not achieve full enlightenment by the time that they died, it played a metaphysical role in their continued spiritual evolution after death. And all of that is, you know, explained in the book, and how, you know, how things were done, etc. So that's just a short, brief review of the book. It has, I'll tell you how many chapters. It has 5 chapters. Uh, has an index. It's all in color. Uh, it's, you know, it's hefty. It's every book. Uh, it's heavy in two ways. It's heavy in weight, and it's a serious text. You know, it's heavy, and going through the text, I found that the Am Duat really, it goes at the fundamental issues of normal human existence. It really attacks it from a philosophical and metaphysical perspective. So this is a yogic path. Yeah, there are 4 aspects of yoga. Yoga isn't just not merely doing postures. There are 4 aspects of yoga. You have wisdom, meditation, right action, and devotion. In Kemetic, ancient Egyptian terminology, meditation is called Uwa, right action is called Ma'at Ari, devotion is called Uwashu, and wisdom is called Rek. And these are the 4 Shedi disciplines. And Shedi means to penetrate. To penetrate what? To penetrate the mysteries. So you have 4 mysteries, and those 4 mystery systems encompass the practice of yoga. So the postures can be placed under Ma'at Ari, but you can have yoga without postures. Ma'at Ari means righteous action, or selfless service, selfless action. And so because it's action and movement, you can put the yoga system, the posture, which in the Kemetic is called Sima Pau Neteru, union, joining with the gods and goddesses. So just a little of all of that. And I haven't done a YouTube video in a couple of years, at least a while. So I think I'll start doing more. I just wanted to get on here to do a little on the new book. And to get the book, the link is in the description. So just scroll through the description, go to the end. Uh, the description actually talks about the book, and you can click on the link. You can get the book. and we'll mail it out to you. Okay, hope this was helpful in understanding the text, and may you find your way to the text. May the divine lead you to the text that helps to lead the soul to immortality. Okay. Dua, thank you for listening. Heta.